Hello there. Dave and I like nothing more than weird art. Look at that, for example. So we went down to meet the Absurdists, a group of artists down at Padstow who had a large exhibition of weird stuff going on. Come on, Dave, let's go.
Well, this is the Sunshine Refuge for retired pantomime horses. And you might wonder sometimes, what happens to pantomime horses once they are retired?
Right.
Well, they put them in places like this. These are shut away from the public. They just abandoned to make the way as best they can. It's a grim place. And so you might think, you might feel sorry for them. Your initial response is to feel sorry for them, but they are pantomime horses after all. And do people really get pantomime horses and shove them on a reserve somewhere? You might be driving along somewhere and you'll see a colourful bunch huddled under a tree. This is where they end up. Like old performers, like old has-beens. Nobody wants them anymore. They're just shoved out there in the rain, in amongst the brambles, and they're worthy of our sympathy, I think. Next time you pass a herd of pantomime horses, you might think, God, look at them out there. We should donate, we should start a society for the preservation of pantomime horses. We're the Absurdists, and we're trying to bring something a little different into ordinary people's lives, to give them a different perspective on quite often everyday scenes. Everyday situations.
Our work doesn't really exhibit well with what you might call the normal Cornish type art, seascapes and boats and stuff like that. So it was a sensible idea for us to come together. And these two guys set up the Absurdists first, and then I sort of asked for an application form to join, and they accepted me.
Right. Being in Padstow, do you get your archetypal tourists coming in saying they want a picture of the harbour and a seagull? And
it's quite interesting that I think maybe they don't know what to expect when they come in, because obviously it's slightly different, and it's interesting for us too. When they do come in, they think they're going to see pictures of maybe boats on the harbour or something, and they come in and they start off very sort of maybe a little bit blank faced, don't quite know what to expect, and as they go round they suddenly realise what genre we're in.
yes.
And they sort of get it, most of them get it, and they really enjoy it and they love it, and by the time they've been around the rooms they'll go, oh yeah, I really like this, it's really different. And that's what most people say when they come in, but it's not what they expect because they don't know what to expect, and it's just interesting watching them gradually get the gist.
Yeah.
But this came from an exhibition where I was exhibiting some drawings, and a guy came in and went, who's done these? And I said, me. And he went, stop it. And I said, what do you mean stop it? He said, you're too old. You shouldn't be doing this sort of stuff. Which he was suggesting that you had to be young to do anything that was a bit off the wall, you know, which I thought was a bit unfair. So I came back and did this has-been, and once I sort of discovered the secret of baked beans, I was able to do this three-dimensional self-portrait, really.
You discovered the secret of baked beans?
Yes.
You made the beans?
Yeah, this is the silver spoon in my mouth.
Right. This is the wrong day.
This is the wrong day, yeah.
Oh no.
I know, it's dreadful, isn't it?
It's really sad, isn't it?
I think everyone's had that feeling when everyone, I think, at some stage in their life has turned up for something on the wrong day. Whether it's you've just missed the party, or it's the wrong time, or you've just missed the boat or the train or whatever. Somewhere in that filing cabinet in my brain came out the idea of the woods. I do a lot of brainstorming on my own. I think woods, trees, can't see the wood for the trees. I go on like this for ages, and then I say woods. If you go down in the woods today, and sure enough came up the idea of the teddy bear's picnic, and I thought, oh, that would be good in that painting I've got of the woods. And then the idea, that sinking feeling, oh, it's the wrong day. So I put the two together, and that's what I came up with. And it's also a sort of a lady was just saying, she saw it and she thought he looked really determined. He was going to have his picnic regardless of the fact that, this is how different people see it. Like most people go, oh, that's really sad. But it's the idea, she said he's still got all his stuff out, his little teapot and his cake and his bits and pieces. Yeah, I'm going to carry on regardless if no one's turned up, and that's the idea really.
I really like it.
It's tragic. It's terrible.
Have you had any comments from any of the other Cornish artists?
Not really, because I'm a bit hard on the majority of what I call commercial Cornish art. I'm not talking about the sort of art that painters, the serious painters in St Ives do for their own particular following. I'm quite hard on the people that go to a few art classes, then produce a few seascapes, then they crowd the galleries with their stuff, and then they'll say, and then their friends will say to them, well, have you done, oh, I've sold loads of stuff, I've done ever so well. Well, you must be ever so good then, if you've done well. And the whole thing just stops there. There's very little room for people like us to do something that is different, that is accessible to the average person in the street.
There is some interesting thing about Cornish art. There's a lot of fabulously talented craftspeople. You know, people who can really paint, what you might call good pictures. And we go to quite a lot of those exhibitions because we're artists. We'll go to people's exhibitions and have a look round. And you go in and you have to admire people's talent. You know, a tremendous amount of talent about it. A week later, if somebody quizzed you about the exhibition, you'd find it hard to remember anything. You'd be thinking, oh, yeah, you know, there was a sea, there was a landscape or whatever. Yeah, it was very good. But it's not memorable. And if it didn't go with the colour of curtains, you wouldn't buy it. You know. Now, hopefully, when people go from here, even though they might not want to buy it, they might not want to hang it in their house, they will say, "Do you remember that particular picture?" And we hope that most people who've come in here and have given it a little bit of time will remember this 6 months, a year down the line. You can ask them about it, and they say, "Oh, I remember that."
This is the end of the Tooth Fairy, and it's a metaphor, really, for the end of the dream. These days, probably if kids have a tooth out, if they were to be told, put it under your pillow and the tooth fairy will come and give you 10pence, or give you a shilling, or a shiny florin, the average kid these days would think, now if I could get the tooth fairy and put it in a jam jar, that would be worth more than a shilling, a shiny shilling, or with inflation £1 or £2. So then the story would be, because my paintings are narrative paintings, well, how would you catch a tooth fairy? I know, a mouse trap. So you'd be laying asleep there, and all of a sudden you'd hear, thwack! Ah! And you would have your tooth fairy, and on eBay or something, you could make yourself vast amounts of money with a tooth fairy in a jar.
Lovely.
Bill said about encouraging people to have a go.
Yeah.
I had a lady in here the other day who's a sort of amateur painter, and she was looking at Trevor's serial killer there, and she said, "I'd love to do something like that. I'd really love to do something like that." And my response was, "Well, why don't you then?" Because she's in a painting group that paints nice little pictures, fine, fair enough. But that's kind of the thing she really wants to do. But somehow she hasn't got the bravery to say to the group, actually, I want to stick bits of whatever on it and do something a bit mad, because all the rest of her painting peers are doing the same thing. And you could see the sort of real, it sparked her off to say, yeah, I really want to be doing that. And I thought, well, why aren't you? And she couldn't really answer me. But you know what it is. It's just, it takes quite a lot of courage, I suppose, to break out and go, yes, I want to do something different, especially if you're surrounded by people doing virtually the same sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it was, I wondered when she left, I thought, I wonder if she will go home and do something a bit mad.
Yeah.
And you never know, it might have just given her well, if they can do it, why can't I?
One thing that we've noticed is our painting appeals, or artwork appeals right across the board, and it's quite difficult for people our age, usually, to communicate with people who are teenagers, etc. And if you do get somebody that's a teenager and they want to start painting, usually they'll have somebody that's older say, you'll never sell that, you'll never sell that. And there's this tremendous these days pressure on, have you sold any? Have you sold any? How many have you sold? And that's the measure of success. The measure of success these days is gauged on how many paintings you sell. And we probably won't sell hardly any at all. That's not our measure of success. Our measure of success is, have we managed to strike a chord with people? And that might be looked on as really commercial suicide. But sometimes, if everybody just produces stuff to sell, you will end up with this anodyne, sterile artwork. Everybody does the same thing because everybody wants to sell. And it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you do get somebody, especially somebody that's young, that wants to produce something different and something original, and they haven't got loads of money behind them, one thing or another, they'll get crushed. And you won't be able to see it, and I won't be able to see their artwork because they'll have their olders and betters, inverted commas, down and we'll never sell that. What's the point of doing it? And this is a blow for originality and imagination, really.
One of the fascinating things hopefully about this sort of exhibition, and I've certainly noticed this time and previously exhibiting stuff like this, is that it with a normal exhibition you will get your middle-aged, middle class, you might get some young people coming in, but then they'll all be over 28, they'll be that sort of age. We've had people here come in and then they go and get their kids and bring them in because they know their children will enjoy it. So we've had quite young children in, and teenagers are brought in. You must come and look at this. My daughter's doing A-level art, was one woman, you must have a look at this. So what we find is this does appeal across a range, whereas if you're just doing a landscape,
that's interesting, that's important.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's been quite exciting. If you get somebody who's quite young and, they might be 8 or 9, and one girl, like my baked bean picture, and the tooth fairy ones appealed, the dog stuff has appealed to a lot of people, the dog juggler. People really, it's appealed across the board, and that's really good. If you're doing 5 to 80, I think we're achieving our aim. Really.
And it shows you can think outside the box, as they used to say.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's really important because imagination is just so important, and it gets stifled so much these days.
Good type for a picture, that.
Oh,
think outside the box.
The madder the image, the more likely you are to remember it, aren't you? So
absolutely.
it goes without saying that these kind of images will stick in your head, whether you want them to or not.